And there's a previous YouTube of Susan and Plantain. We have skullcap, yet another mint, and a wonderful mint that grows very wet, and it's very relaxed. You know, we were looking at the Prunella vulgaris, right? And we saw it where it had been mowed over and it was still just like standing up and blooming and the bees were in it. And then we saw it over there in the unmowed part. And again, it's like really standing up and it's vigorous and it's like, yes. And we saw the lemon balm and the lemon balm is like upright and with its flowers. And we saw the sage and the sage is like, yeah, right. And the rosemary is so strong and powerful. And even the thyme was like that. Skullcap lays down. She gets up a little ways and then she just flops over. She can't ever quite keep herself awake. Which tells us something, doesn't it? Pale blue lavender flowers that have a persistent calyx. We've been talking about persistent calyxes today. That looks like a little skull. And I always said does not. Doesn't look like a skull. Until I saw Tibetan monks playing skull drums, and the shape of the skull drums is exactly the shape. And it's the skull without this part. Right? So it's like there's a right where this comes up, the skull drum has this, right? And that's what the skull cap calyx, when the seeds are in it, looks like. So I was quite attracted to the skullcap. And skullcap said, yeah, I'm really, really good for helping you sleep, especially when you're in pain. And I have found that. I told you about hurting my wrist in Costa Rica. And what I would do is I went to sleep with my arm and my wrist as far away from me as possible. Okay, that's my wrist. That's over there. This is me over here. Right? So not relating. And that's good. Distancing yourself from the pain can help a lot. But when I would wake up, and of course I would wake up every, hour and a half or so, I had the skull cap right there and a little bit of infusion, and I'd put 5 to 10 drops of skull cap in a glass, take it. Next thing you know, I'd be asleep again. Pain-free. I have seen skullcap actually perform things that I would think were impossible. My beloved Kialis, no longer in her body, but I know you're here, came to me with Bell's palsy. Half of her face was basically paralyzed. And she's sitting across from me, and I said, where do you live? And she says, Ottawa, Toronto, New York City. And I'm thinking, what's this, John? This woman's saying, Toronto, New York City, what? So I'm a little, and she tells me a whole bunch of stuff, which I'm having a bit of a hard time believing, but nonetheless, I can relate to her as a person. It doesn't matter whether this is all true or not, what she's telling me about Robert Kaplan, her husband. And she says, I've been under the care of this person, and he said there was no way that he could do anything for me, that I had to come and see you, so that's why I'm here. I'm like, great. Not a clue as what could possibly affect this. However, the night before, I had taught a class on nervines, herbs that affect the nervous system. Skullcap was one of them. And as is frequently the case, not only am I often late, I will often put herbs in baskets and then leave them there for a while. I don't always put them right away. Well, this was only the day before, but they were all still out. And I went over to the basket of all of those nervines and I said, all right, somebody volunteer. And it was the skullcap. Got her some infusion, put 5 drops of skullcap in the infusion, gave it to her, and she said, it works. She just smiled at both sides of her face. Oh my gosh. So we became very tight friends. And her husband, Robert Captain, who you should know because he was very high in the government in Canada, he was the head of the equivalent of the FBI and was asked to run for prime minister but didn't want to. So they really did live in Toronto and Ottawa and New York City. He actually instituted what do you know what you call the government agency that's like the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Canada?
CSIS?
Yeah. The what?
CSIS.
CSIS. He created it, Robert Kaplan. So when I stayed at their house, I stayed in the room that was covered floor to ceiling, wall to wall, with framed nasty cartoons about him. I mean, really nasty cartoons. And he got a lot of flack for doing that. And, you know, we can all say it doesn't matter what people think about me. And it doesn't, but it also does. Especially when there's that level of nastiness going on. And so the way that his stress impacted him was that he couldn't sleep. So he told his doctor he couldn't sleep, and his doctor said, well, you're in a very high-stress position, and there's all this flak coming to you. I'll give you a sleeping pill, that'll help. And it did. He'd take a sleeping pill, he'd go to sleep. But after a while, it didn't keep him asleep all night. And the doctor said, well, that's okay. You wake up 2, 3 o'clock, you take another one. And he did, and he went back to sleep. But my friend said, it's like sleeping with a zombie here. This is like ruining our marriage here. I don't want to be in bed with this. You got to help him, Susan. Because if you don't help him, it's all over. I'm like, oh, whoa. Where can I get these assignments that I don't know anything about? But I said, all right, there's a lot of herbs for sleeping. Who's going to be the ally here? And Skullcap said, it's me. I'm the one that's really going to work for Bob. So here's what I told Bob. I said, Bob, I want you to get a candle that's safe so that if you fall asleep, it won't burn your house down in a jar or in a metal hole or something that you feel really safe about. Or my parents said they used to have old people's candles where the wick didn't go to the bottom, so it burnt out. So something like that. I said, and when you get in bed, I want you to light that candle. And for 5 to 10 minutes, I want you to either read something relaxing, not a report, or listen to music. And then you take 5 drops of Skullcap in some liquid, blow the candle out, and go to sleep. And he was also to have another glass of liquid with 5 drops of Skullcap already in it. And an easy way to light the candle. So that if he was not asleep within 10 minutes, he was to take the second drop of Skullcap and read or listen to music again for 5 to 10 minutes. And he said, it really worked. He was quite amazed. And what he liked most about it was he slept through the night. He said at first he would wake up pretty early, but it was early enough that he could actually start his day, 5:30, not like crazy early. And then he was able to actually sleep a little more. So Skullcap was a wonderful ally to that entire family. It's certainly a plant that I love. When we went to Toronto to get her wisdom teeth removed, the dentist, of course, prescribed a painkiller. And she said to me, what happens if I take this painkiller? I said, it kills the pain. Well, actually, it doesn't kill the pain, it just kills your perception of the pain, but the pain goes on. And she said, well, did you bring me herbs that will do better? I said, well, of course I did. Here's the Skullcap, right? It might very well change your perception, but it actually has a direct effect on the pain itself. And my recollection was that you got through the pain of your wisdom teeth removal with our ally Skullcap.
And ice cream and applesauce.
And ice cream. Hey, it's all good.